Let's look at everybody's medical history. Let's see what's happened since water fluoridation started. Let's see the amount of thyroid cancers, of just bad thyroid function, of problems with the kidneys, bone cancers. Let's look at all that because there's been enough studies to show that has increased. So you can look at timelines of things, you can look at when mercury villains were first introduced and problems and all these cases of MS and things like that are neurological problems. You can look at timing and go, is it cause and effect? I don't want to say it's direct cause and effect, but I would definitely say it plays a role.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
Hey everybody, I'm Hilda Labrada-Gore and this is episode 186. Our guest today is Dr. Griffin Cole. Griffin has been in the biological dentistry field for over 25 years. He earned his dental degree from the University of Texas Health Science Center, is board certified in naturopathic medicine, and has a postdoctoral degree in integrative biological dental medicine. He is a popular speaker, and it is no wonder why. He really knows his stuff. Today, we focus on the issue of fluoride in the water. Fluoride has been added to our tap water for decades as a cavity-fighting measure. Today, Griffin takes issue with this practice. He points to numerous studies, including reports on the websites of the Center for Disease Control and the American Dental Association, that indicate that fluoride in the water is not an effective cavity-preventing protocol, and even worse, it actually damages our health on multiple levels. Today, Griffin gets into it. He explains how fluoride is interfering with normal hormone function and wreaking havoc with other systems in our body, including the kidney function, pineal gland, and more. Plus, he helps us wrap our heads around why, when there is so much evidence about how fluoride in the water systems is harming us, why it continues to be such a pervasive practice in the U.S., and what communities across the country are doing to reverse the practice. He also dives into what we can do as individuals to decrease our own exposure to fluoride. It's a fascinating conversation, but before we get into it, I want to tell you about a free resource from the Weston A. Price Foundation. It's 7 easy lessons to get you started eating a nourishing diet. If you've ever wondered what to do first, if you want to live a healthier life, this is a quick virtual guide. These basics on the Wise Traditions diet are free, and they will come straight to your inbox when you sign up for them. So just go to our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the green button that says Get the Basics of the Wise Traditions Diet. Sign up, and they'll be delivered to your email account right away. It's that easy and that wonderful. And a big thank you to our sponsor, Ancestral Supplements, the makers of Gallbladder with Ox Bile. Based on the ancient wisdom of like supports like, Ancestral Supplements put New Zealand-sourced nose-to-tail organ meats and bone marrow in convenient gelatin capsules. Order yours today at ancestralsupplements.com. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Griffin.
Thanks for having me.
I was thrilled when I first heard you, because you're a dentist and the spirit of Dr. Price, if you will, myth-busting all over the place.
That's right. Yeah, I'm a biologic dentist here in Austin, and I gave my talk today on water fluoridation and why we should not be doing it.
Okay, this is going to blow some people's minds because fluoridation has been a part of U.S. history for some time. Can you give us the background on it?
Yeah, so I think it started from an altruistic standpoint in that there was a dentist in Colorado Springs, Dr. Frederick McKay, who noticed that the kids had these brown spots on their teeth, and he tried to figure out why these same kids have brown spots, they have less cavities, what's going on. Anyway, after 30 years, he figured out that there was high amounts of fluoride in the water. So I think it started off right. But unfortunately, on the East Coast, there were people from Alcoa and other organizations that had fluoride as a waste product and had to figure out some way to deal with this. And they put the two things together, and that's how it finally got added to the water supply.
Okay, hold on. So what's interesting is, in the Weston Price Foundation, we're always talking about healthy fats. Crisco was developed because it was a waste petroleum product. And so they found a use for it because it looked a lot like lard. And they were like, why don't we sell it like that? So it sounds to me like something similar happened with fluoride.
Yeah, but I think this is a little bit more sinister in that it's truly a very toxic waste product, not only from the metal manufacturers, but also from the fertilizer industry. So they are forced by the EPA to install scrubbing stacks, right, to capture the fluoride because it's so toxic to both the air and the ground. So they're not allowed to dump it in landfills or let it vaporize. So the question is, well, then where do we put it? And somehow they chose our water supply.
Oh my gosh, this is mind-blowing. I don't understand because mainstream dentistry still seems to have the stamp of approval on fluoride today. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as long as the ADA or the CDC, as long as they promote it, then most mainstream dentists are just going to acquiesce. You know, it's biologic dentists like myself and other practitioners that want to question and say, well, wait a second, before I push that on my patients, I want to learn a little bit more about the science of it. And that's when you get into what's really going on here.
That's what I want to delve into right now, because you made a distinction in your presentation between the topical fluoride and that which is systemic. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I don't argue the point that topical fluoride works in how it's purported to, meaning that if you apply fluoride to your teeth, you will have a anti-cariogenic effect. The question is do you need that? Or can you do a good diet, good home care, things like that? The answer is you don't need fluoride at all. But if somebody wants to argue that it works topically, fine. I'll let them have that point. The issue, though, is with water fluoridation, it's not topical at all. It's systemic, right? You're drinking it. So the question is does that have any topical effect? And the answer is no.
And not only does it not have a positive effect for preventing cavities, but it has some health disrupting effects, right? Can you go into that a little bit?
Oh my gosh, the list is endless. Just off the top, it affects the thyroid gland. It'll decrease your thyroid function because why? Because fluoride will always beat iodine to your thyroid. Fluoride is the most reactive element on the entire periodic table. And what people may not know is that when fluoride is added to other chemicals, it exacerbates their action. So for instance, when you hear about water being brown and tasting bad like in Flint, Michigan, or recently in Sandy, Utah, it's because the lead and copper is leaching from the pipes. Well, what caused that to happen so quickly? It was the fluoride that was added to the water. And no one talks about that. They'll briefly touch on it maybe in saying, be careful not to drink this, but they don't tell you that it is absolutely the fluoride acid that was added, which made lead and copper leach from the pipes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So it interferes with our thyroid function. What else goes on?
It calcifies your pineal gland, which of course affects your hormone regulation. It affects kidney function. It will mess with your glucose levels. It's an endocrine disruptor, which can potentially lead to cancer. It makes your bones fragile. It, of course, gets the flex on the teeth called fluorosis. It goes on and on.
But is this information out there? Like, why isn't the ADA saying, okay, let's stop this because obviously it has all these effects we weren't expecting?
So it is out there. Any PubMed search, you can find all the articles on it. And mind you, like on my talk today, everything I showed you, I based in science. So when I give you a quote, it either comes from the CDC, their own site where they promote fluoridation. I show you how if you dig deep enough, they actually will admit that the effects are post-eruptive and topically, not pre-eruptive and systemically. So that negates water fluoridation altogether. But beyond that, whenever you can go online and find like the ADA or somebody that promotes water fluoridation. They'll try to counter all the points that I just made, but look carefully at how they do it. They'll say things like, well, that study was done in China, so therefore it doesn't apply here. Or they'll say things like that where it's like, well, wait a second, it's still a human test. And in fact, in China, where they did like these IQ tests, and they showed that children that drank fluoridated water had lower IQ points, it was a really good test because it was in a community where that was the only difference between the two villages was fluoride. So it is a really nice, controlled, kind of a clinically randomized trial. And so those are the kind of arguments they use to counter science.
So there's nothing in the foreseeable future where they're going to like reverse their position on this? Because what interests are at play here?
That's a great question. I don't even want to get into the money aspect because I'm sure if we were to follow it, we'd find something there. But I will tell you this, and we talked about this earlier. So just a few years ago, everybody agreed, Health and Human Services, your U.S. Public Health Service, the CDC, everybody agreed that 41% of adolescents have fluorosis. So we're talking every 2 of 5 kids now, between ages 8 and 15, have water fluorosis on their teeth. So they got the flex, right, white or brown. Well, just a month ago, 2 months ago, they came out with an updated now. It's 65% now. 65% of adolescents now have fluorosis in America.
And fluorosis is a consequence of the fluoride in the water, and what's it doing to their teeth?
Okay, great question because you bring up a very good point. So it does make the teeth more brittle, right? And you'll see the spots. But my point that I always make to people is that's the only cosmetic thing that we can visually see. Imagine what's already happened in your body systemically to get to that point.
What percentage of cities in the U.S. have fluoridation in their water?
Oh, good question. I should know that. I think it's 75% of all the municipalities, something like that, something really high. They're shooting for 100, but they're not going to get it. And I will say that number is dropping lately because more and more people are getting this information. A lot of the small communities where money does matter, they're dropping it. Places like my town, Austin, where we've got, plenty of money, it's not such a good argument. But I think we're going to see, I do think in the next 10 years, we'll see more and more communities dropping this or not starting it at all, I hope.
And there is a public outcry, right? In other words, some of them are dropping it because people are saying, we don't want this in our water.
Portland, Oregon, great example. Over a million citizens there. I was so proud of them because that, unlike Austin, is a very progressive city. And it was completely just a grassroots movement. They spoke out. The people said, we don't want this. They had scientists, dentists even, that said, we don't need this. And sure enough, they stopped it from being added.
Now, Griffin, do other dentists give you a hard time because of your stance against fluoridation?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I started 26 years ago, and I was definitely laughed at then, for sure, because I didn't place amalgam fillings either because of the mercury, and so I was like, I guess you'd call me like a quack in mainstream's mind. But you know what? My close friends that are dentists, they respect me because I show them things like I showed you guys today. I show them the science. I say, listen, if you want to have a discussion or a true debate, let's do this because I'm going to bring everything I have science-wise, and you can't just argue, well, it's been around for 70 years. Those arguments don't work anymore. People are too smart nowadays. They want to say, show me the science.
And let's talk a little bit about one of the stats you showed. You showed some kind of data manipulation that made it seem like fluoridation was a good idea that I guess the ADA and others lift up as an example. Can you tell us how that data is being misused?
Yeah, so in 1986/87, the NIDR, the National Institute of Dental Research, conducted the largest study on water fluoridation. And they looked at like 39,000 kids over 52 areas. And their results, they said, were that there was an 18% difference, meaning that the areas that fluoridated had 18% less decay on average, some as high as 32%. So those numbers are pretty impressive. So the Safe Water Foundation, under the Freedom of Information Act, said, show us the data. And they sent boxes and boxes to try to overwhelm them. Well, they took their time. They looked at all the data, and in the end, they realized what they were doing was they were playing with the numbers a bit. They were using relative values, meaning they would say, well, we looked at all the 7-year-olds, and we found that this many had cavities and this many had less. So that was their number. But when you're doing science, you have to look at the absolute value. You got to compare apples to apples. So let's look at all 7-year-olds. How many tooth surfaces actually had decay? Not just teeth, surfaces. And when it was all said and done, the relative value they got was 18% average. The absolute value was 0.6%. So it's not even significant.
And yet they use some of this data to justify keeping fluoride in the water.
That's correct. And they will continue to use it.
Coming up, Griffin gives us recommendations for activism if we live in a city with fluoride in the water. Plus, he actually does give us a sneak peek behind the curtain at the money trail that could very well be influencing this push to keep fluoride in our water.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Mike, the Heal Your Gut guy. Are you dealing with digestive issues? Do you react to delicious sourdough bread and other starches? Do you pay dearly when you eat cheap foods? Mike, the Heal Your Gut guy, also suffered from these issues, even when following Weston A. Price dietary principles. Mike will show you the extra steps he took to heal himself and how he helps many others take care of gut issues like Crohn's, colitis, IBS, SIBO, and Candida. Mike will show you how to heal your gut 100% naturally without drugs. The Heal Your Gut Guy YouTube channel page has the videos you need to heal your gut. You don't have to walk a dietary tightrope. Just search for the Heal Your Gut Guy on YouTube. You'll find tons of free information rooted in the laws of Mother Nature and ancestral wisdom. And Gallbladder with Ox Bile by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements offer New Zealand-sourced, nose-to-tail, organ meats, bone marrow, and gallbladder with ox bile in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Our early Native American ancestors would commonly take a buffalo, cut it open on the spot, and eat the warm liver seasoned with gallbladder and bile. The bile was sprinkled on various organs and glands as a condiment, the way we might use mustard today. Word has it that gallbladder and bile did a whole lot more than just improve the taste. gallbladder, ox bile, and liver provided concentrated amounts of gallbladder-specific building blocks, bile and liver, that support our biliary tract, gallbladder, liver, bile ducts, and they are now absent from the modern diet. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Let's say I live in a city where they're not budging and there's fluoride in that water. What should I do?
You know, honestly, because I've been fighting Austin now for 15 years, and I've not been successful. It's grassroots for sure. You know, you have to either get it on a referendum, get enough outcry to where maybe they put it out to the people, to get signatures, that kind of thing. That's probably your best way, because to fight against city council, I can tell you I've been unsuccessful for many years, even though I win all the debates. It's just, you know, they're so stuck on this. And listen, I will tell you, here's where I can share money with you, okay? And this I do know. And I didn't want to share it earlier because I don't know who's listening in the audience. But the CDC gives money to a lot of cities. And I'll tell you this. Back in 2011, when we were having our biggest fight, and I thought we were going to maybe get with the old city council to maybe come to a vote and say, let's relook at fluoridation. That same year, the CDC gave Austin $9 million for a smoking cessation study. First of all, in 2011, smoking wasn't really even an issue anymore, right? So $9 million to do a smoking cessation study. If Austin were to say, we're not going to fluoridate anymore, CDC says, fine, we're not feeding you anymore. You can't bite the arm that feeds you. And that's exactly what happens in these larger cities. They want that money.
So that smoking cessation study money was like telling them, not necessarily that these are equated, but I get it. These people are giving you tons of money. You're not going to say, oh, by the way, we're not going to do this other thing that brings you a lot of money.
That's exactly right. So that is where you can follow the money for sure.
So you're one biological dentist. How does the whole field of biological dentistry see the situation with fluoride? Or are you the sole lone wolf out there?
Well, no. Most biologic dentists are in agreement with me, which is nice. I mean, that's why we're biologic dentists. We look at the whole body. So we're concerned about everything from what they put in their mouth to how they sleep. So for us, water, adding fluoride to the water is a no-brainer. You shouldn't do it. But mainstream dentistry, which is the much larger faction of dentistry, they still promote it. And it's unfortunate that whenever I get into a discussion with another dentist, it never goes well because I'm trying to listen to their viewpoint. Yeah. And I'll say something like, well, can you tell me where you get that information? And they'll just say, oh, please, it's been around for 70 years. That's not a valid argument.
No.
And so I think if we had more dialogues like this, and maybe even some he said, she said, whatever it is, point, counterpoint, and made it to where the public could see, I think that'd be effective. And I say that because back in 2011 again, we invited Paul Connett, who runs the Fluoride Action Network. It's the largest anti-fluoride group in the world. And you can look them up. But we invited him down, and it was he and I were arguing in front of city council and an audience against an MD from West Texas and a dentist. And if you watch it, the audience was laughing so hard at their responses that they were almost asked to leave because they could see that here we were giving all this scientific validation to show that you should not do it, and their answers would be like, it's been around forever, it's perfectly good. I mean, there was no real scientific debate. And so my point is that if enough people see that, I think we get a movement going.
Have you ever thought about making a little movie or putting something on YouTube?
I'm on YouTube a lot talking about this, so no, I'm not going to make a movie. And there's a lot of great documentaries already out there. Fluoride Gate, that is done by my colleague, Dr. David Kennedy, is wonderful. So if you get a chance to watch that. But there's a lot of them. Poison horses, there's so many out there. So we don't need another one of those. But we need people just to talk about it more.
Now, does anybody say, well, it has been around for a long time, and look at most of us, we're doing well, we're thriving. What would you say to them?
I would say, are you? I would say, let's look at everybody's medical history. Let's see what's happened since water fluoridation started. Let's see the amount of thyroid cancers, of just bad thyroid function, of problems with the kidneys, bone cancers. Let's look at all that because there's been enough studies to show that has increased. So you can look at timelines of things, you can look at when mercury fillings were first introduced and problems and all these cases of MS and things like that are neurological problems. You can look at timing and go, is it cause and effect? I don't want to say it's direct cause and effect, but I would definitely say it plays a role. So I would say, are you really, if they ask that question?
Yeah, that's a good comeback. Because you did mention in your list of dangers neurotoxins, right? That this interrupts our brain function.
Yeah, in fact, I didn't even know that just a few years ago until that study came out, because I knew all the other things, but I didn't know it was a neurotoxin. I know mercury is. Mercury is the most dangerous neurotoxin on Earth, but I didn't know fluoride was. So that was very interesting. Now, we knew about the IQ, so that made sense, right? Because if your IQ is dropping, that's definitely neurological. There's something going on. But I had no idea that it was a nerve poison like it is. So that's just another thing to add to the list of why we shouldn't have it.
So why is fluoride even in our toothpaste?
Great question. I think it just sort of paints that whole picture of fluoride's good for you. Again, as I mentioned on my presentation, it does have a topical effect. There's no question. I don't argue that point. But I do argue the point, do we need it? And again, I get back to diet and home care, and diet mostly. They're like with the whole Weston Price Foundation, his book, these people didn't even have toothbrushes, right? They had healthy teeth, and they had beautiful jaw size arches, and everything matched up, and straight teeth. That was all diet related. It's unnecessary.
I think it's amazing that you're holding this unpopular opinion and not just holding it and keeping it to yourself, but getting it out there as much as you can. So again, I just want to talk from the listener's point of view and my own. How can I protect myself from the fluoride in the water?
Okay, great question, because as I mentioned, 65% now of adolescents have fluorosis, meaning we have way too much exposure. So as a person who's concerned with diet, that's your first step, okay? We can't prove that organic sources don't water with fluoridated water. We don't know that. So find out your source. Wherever you get your food, if you can afford to do this, obviously buy organic, buy clean, and make sure that their crops are being watered with non-fluoridated water. That's the first thing. If you can't do that, eliminate it in all forms possible, meaning avoid things like tea, iced tea, black tea. It's got a lot of naturally occurring fluoride. Avoid things like raisins. Raisins have a high amount of fluoride too. There are lists of foods that you'll find online that have high amounts. Avoid those things. Do not drink tap water that has fluoride. Do your best. If you got to filter it with either reverse osmosis or some other kind of filter, or you buy bottled spring water, which is what I recommend, do that. Avoid it in all forms possible. Then you're limiting your exposure, and therefore you won't be as affected by it.
Wow, that's fantastic. And about the water itself, do you recommend reverse osmosis water?
Not to drink, because as you know, it strips everything out. So the water is depleted of minerals. So you can cook with it, right? You can cook with it. If you can make that much and bathe with it, great. But when it comes to actually drinking, you need those minerals, the good ones. So that's why I recommend bottled spring water.
So I want to pivot for a moment and talk about our fluoridation rates compared to Europe. I understand Europe actually doesn't fluoridate. What decay rates do they see?
Great question. So, like I showed in my presentation, the World Health Organization did a really nice graph of that, and they showed that decay rates were equally dropping throughout the world at the same rate, meaning that fluoride has nothing to do with it, because 97% of Western Europe doesn't add fluoride to their water. 97%. So they know better over there, right? So the point that we have better decay rates is just not true. Everybody's have been dropping over the years, and I think it's because more education, better nutrition, hopefully, better home care.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. They seem so advanced in so many ways.
Yeah, well,
like they use less GMOs, they've banned all these chemicals that we allow. It's just crazy. Okay, and now let's talk more about the facts, because I feel like, Griffin, you have a good grasp on the facts. And the ADA website actually shows fluoridation facts as well. How reliable are those facts that they're putting out there?
I would say not at all. As I mentioned in my presentation, I went through all their references, right? They have 359 references. The last time I checked, they may have updated it some. But of those 359 references, 27%, 90 of them, were letters to the editor, personal conversations, monographs, Gallup polls, not science at all. So 27%. The rest of them predominantly were from a thing called Carey's Research, which sounds like a good journal, but it's not peer-reviewed. So to me, when you put anything out there from a journal, if it's not peer-reviewed, it's not as reputable as those that are, right? Because you want to have your peers looking at your information, validating it, checking you on facts, and this whole journal doesn't do that. They had a few from some good reputable sources, but very few. So to call them facts, that's why I put facts in quotes, because I found a lot of things that weren't factual.
Well, what we'll do is in our show notes, we'll put links to some of the reliable studies that we can look at for our own information on this. And I will put a link to the ADA website just so people can see for themselves.
That's a great idea. But I will tell you that you will not be able to find their fluoridation facts without being an ADA member, which I'm not anymore, or a special code. They've locked it now, which I find interesting. I presented on this in Reno just a few years ago, and at that time you could go on and get it, and now you can't. So find a dentist who can get on it for you. Maybe I can get a copy of it and get it to you at some point, but I'm working on it.
Wow. That's a big move there. That's a big censorship move. We'll put on our website what we can and our show notes. And I want to ask you the question I often pose at the end here, Griffin. If the listener could do one thing to improve their health, and maybe related to this fluoride topic, what would you recommend that they do?
I think it's exactly what I just told you, which is to avoid it at all costs. So if you're in a community that adds fluoride to the water, don't drink it. Do your best to filter it. If you can't afford to do that, then find ways to maybe find affordable spring water. I would recommend in bottles, but if you can't do that, that's better than drinking the fluoride. So avoid all sources possible. Go online, look up high fluoride containing foods, meaning naturally containing fluoride. Try to avoid those for sure. And definitely, you do not need a fluoridated toothpaste to have clean teeth. You just don't. It's not something you need. If you're worried about, because your child maybe has a lot of cavities and you're like, I've heard it helps, fine. Use it sparingly, do not swallow it, but I can tell you there's other ways to stop cavities that has nothing to do with fluoride.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a great pleasure, Griffin.
Thanks for having me.
Our guest today was Dr. Griffin Cole. Check out his website, griffincole.com, for more on Griffin and biological dentistry. And I'm Holistic Hilda. Sign up for my monthly newsletter at holistichilda.com. For the complete show notes for this and all podcast episodes, just go to our website, westinaprice.org. And that's it. Let's keep in touch, everybody, and see you next time.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.